Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always. And today we are joined by Rica Ruth Alexandra Serenio, a seasoned leader with 2 decades of experience spanning technology, project management, and global diplomacy. As CEO of Sarangani Petro Oil Corporation, she fuses tradition with innovation to truly champion sustainability, community development, and energy independence. Driven by her deep commitment to progress, Rica orchestrates groundbreaking strategies connecting local government units, academic institutions, and international partners. She has fostered impactful collaborations in the tech and startup arena, ensuring entrepreneurs thrive in an evolving industry. Anchored by a strong growth mindset, Rica leads with tenacity, embracing challenges to forge a resilient, forward-looking energy future. And I've asked her to join us here today to share her story and insights on the future of energy in our lives. So, Rica, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous, Daryl. Thank you for having me on the show. Such an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor and pleasure to have you. And now, before we get into today's state of affairs, the sort of state of the union and what's happening in the industry and what to expect in the future, I want to go back and ask, how did you even get started in this? Is this a family tradition? Are you carrying the torch, or is this something you just picked up on your own?
Basically, the company was founded by my father. He was in the real estate industry back in the south in the country of the Philippines. We are an independent oil and gas exploration company. And unfortunately, in 2015, my dad passed away. And then the
Mm,
project came into a sudden stop. Not
mm,
until sometime 2022 when I received a phone call with one of my dad's partners and asked if I was interested in actually reviving the whole thing, considering that the market and should I say the government is actually pushing for sustainable energy future in the country. Intimidated at first with everything else that you do with life for the first time, right? And I was like, how are we actually
mhm,
going to do this? But at the end of the day, there was a bigger push for me to actually bring this out again
mm.
with that conviction that this is not just about a business. This is actually putting out something that benefits not just very few, but a lot. And hopefully that contributes to the energy situation in the country.
I love that. So, did you grow
Mm.
up working in the family business then? Is this something that you,
Yes,
okay?
yes. So my parents were entrepreneurs. They've had their story of rags to riches and then rags again. You know how it is with entrepreneurship. Sometimes you have a win and you have seasons in life when you're like really scrambling at the bottom of the barrel. They've done distributorships for computer brands before. My dad was very much into real estate. That was
Mm,
his bread and butter. And then I've seen how entrepreneurship actually evolved through the years. And
mm,
I have, I should say, learned vicariously from them. I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur early on.
mm.
I always had the thought that, okay, I'm just going to get an 8 to 5 and have my retirement benefits by 60 and call it a life, right?
Really?
So that was that. But then life sometimes move you to certain directions, and rather than
Mm,
go against it, you go, okay, there's probably something here that I need to pay attention to. I've done consulting for tech. And then eventually that led us to where I am now, which is I sit as the person who's operating this company.
So, when you went in, because I know that you went and did a Bachelor of Science, your
Mhm.
BS in Business Management, Marketing,
Major in marketing.
major in
Yes.
marketing. So, when you did, that was the intent to work in a big corporation, though. That wasn't the intent to take over the family business or to run a business.
No, no, that was definitely not the plan. My plan was okay, focus on marketing because you're good, and then work with companies under a consulting capacity and
Mm,
just stay with that bubble. Human as we are, we want to play it safe. And then life pushed me to actually get into something more inspiring right now. So that's where we
mm,
are. So I should also say that even though the background is in marketing, I've had experience working for a consulting firm that work with projects with government.
mhm,
So
mhm.
government to government from one country to the other, projects at massive scale. I'll give you one example. We work with a project here in the Philippines that would ideally reduce the cost of importing rice in the Philippines. As
Mm.
the Philippines says, life is rice.
Yeah. Only rice.
That's one thing. And I found it quite an appealing industry to be in, wherein you be in rooms where people make decisions that actually have bigger impacts to society.
Hmm.
So that's one. And then I was in tech for, I should say, 13, 14 years, right?
Mm.
With a focus on digital marketing. So I've worked with companies from all over the world, mostly companies from the US, and I help them navigate through the digital world when spreading their message across and then finding the right audiences for them. So I like that strategic and creative aspect to it. Now, how that affects what I'm doing now, same principle applies. We have a product that everybody's looking for. We just need to find the right eyeballs and spread the message across that we have a solution for a very critical need, not just in the Philippines, but globally.
I love that. So let me recap. So it sounds like you watched your dad as an entrepreneur and your mom, and it seems like a lot of
Mm,
it was real estate based, which is a phenomenal vehicle for learning kind of business law and even business management, because rental
mm,
properties and a lot of real estate, it's like buying and selling a business in a lot of cases. You
mhm,
analyze it the same way. The due diligence is very similar. So that's a great
mhm.
kind of background. And
And
as
you
a,
also learn about economics, which is when you look into opportunities from a business lens, right? It's synonymous to economics, and real estate is really just about placement of whatever property there is and what is
Mhm.
the potential of that property. So that's another thing. I know there's a lot of retail real estates that's selling residential properties or even commercial properties, but my curiosity has always been on the, let's just say, the macro aspect of it. So if it was a province or a region, it's really looking into, okay, what is the geography of this locality? What is its potential? What does it need in terms of infrastructure to get it into such economic boom? That's how my brain works, if that makes sense.
No, I love it. I love it. And so then you go to school, you think you're just going to work in a big company, you get consulting experience, you're jumping in and out of a lot of different businesses, a lot of different industries. You're in
Mm,
tech and digital, so you're already understanding the digitization of that digital transition a lot of companies are going through. You've got experience with that. And
mm-hmm,
now a few years ago, I think, and you also get experience working government to government, G to G, but also B to G. Is that true as well?
mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
And now you
Business
come
to
back
consumers.
to the company your dad started when you were a kid.
I should say when I was in high school.
Okay. And
Yeah, I was
so
in high school.
I guess I have a question about the challenges. Can you talk about the challenges that you faced through those experiences? Some commonalities. People listening to this, I guess maybe they might be
Mm,
curious to hear some of your insights on B to G and G to G, how that works.
mm.
And also maybe your experience working as a consultant. What were some of the big major mistakes that the clients that you worked with were making?
Okay, here's one thing that I've done. Let's use as an example in marketing. Entrepreneurs would come in and say, hey, this is our problem with the marketing right now. We need more leads, we need more
Always.
exposure, and all of that, right? That's always a concern. And then the first thing that I actually them, what systems do you have in place if there's any, right? Because before you actually find a solution for the problem, you actually have to step back and look internally with the organization what is
Mhm.
happening, because the surface level is it's a marketing problem, but it
Mhm.
could be a process problem
Yep.
internally.
I love that.
So
That's a great example. I have a client I'm working with now. Same
mhm,
thing. We need more leads. We need more exposure. And when we start digging
mhm,
around, they're generating 10 leads a day
mhm,
and there's no follow up. When in their
mhm,
industry, the average number of engagements with a lead, I think, is 13. So on
mhm,
average, a lead needs to be engaged with 13 times before they'll purchase. They're generating 10 leads a day and there's zero follow up. So
mhm,
every day are 130 touches. And then
mhm.
tomorrow, 260. And the next day,
That's
390.
a lot. That's a lot.
And so by like you mentioned, by taking a look at the business, we're like, you don't have a lead generation problem. You have a
Mhm,
lead conversion problem. You have
mhm,
tons of leads, but
mhm,
no one's working them. No one's
mhm,
following up with them. That's a really powerful tip. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. I
And
love that.
and sometimes with companies as well, organizations, it's really identifying as well the weak spots of an
Mm,
organization. Because let's just say if we launch a campaign, right? Okay, we're gonna blast this out, and then they're not ready for the influx. So that's gonna be another waste of resources. So that same principle applies with how I'm managing Sarangani Petro Oil right now,
mm,
because it's a big project, massive, ambitious project. And it's really more of understanding we're not there yet. Let's build our base. And
mm,
then once we get that covered, we go out and spread this out to the world.
mm,
So
mm,
capacity building is very important, not just if you're a new company, but even if you're mid-tier, you really have to continuously
mm,
develop your baseline as an
mm,
organization.
I love that. Why don't more people do B to G?
Okay, depends on which government you're talking about and depends which which agency and the people, right? But in the case of the Philippines, I should say there's the stereotypical red tapes, and being a developing country, it does comes with challenges and resources as well. So it takes a lot of patience to deal with government because the churn rate or the pace that they do things can be quite slow compared to a private organization. So there's one, and it's basically integrating your business, let's just say whether you provide a service or a product to the government, and having to deal with how things are being done in the government. One
Mm,
thing that we need to understand as well, it takes laws and regulations for things to change in government.
mhm,
And sometimes um, the private sector will have to be participative in actually changing those regulations and be an active contributor. This circles back to a conversation that I had with a government official, and I was like inquiring about, hey, you know what? This is what we're doing, and then we're excited to actually work with the government with this
mhm,
project because this is of national significance. I had that eureka moment because this government official just said, you know what, ma'am, we'd like to help, but we are actually also dependent with the private sector to steer us into what we need to do. What that translates in my head was, okay, we're looking into government
mhm,
to provide such opportunity, but they're looking into us to signal to them what are they supposed to do. And the
mm,
opportunity comes here when you actually walk with them through the process. And it's going to be
mm,
painful if you don't have the patience for it. It's going to frustrate the hell
mhm,
out of you,
mhm.
but it is what it is. It is an opportunity for organizations that sees the bigger picture rather than just an immediate, I want, let's close
Right.
this deal and all of that. And you have the whole aspect as well of sometimes, let's just say the presidential election. You have 6 years tenure for every administration to come in, and that
Mm,
comes with varying
right.
changes and reiterations.
Right. So it sounds like it's a good R&D project, but it can be really fickle to a certain extent to base,
Mm,
depending on what you have in your industry.
mhm,
It can be, the contracts can be massive, the upside can be huge,
mhm,
but it can change with every administration. It is a long, unpredictable sort of buying cycle. So it's
mhm,
really hard to do that. So ultimately, it's something that perhaps that you do as R&D. Is that a
mhm,
fair assessment for most businesses? Some, of course, they are B2G and that's what they are. But
mhm.
would you agree with that? Is that a fair assessment?
In terms of R&D with providing a
Well,
product to
R&D in
the
terms of develop, like business development. So R&D in the
mm,
sense of maybe if you're a company, depending what your company is, again, it really
mm,
would vary by industry, but for a lot of
mm,
industries, if you were a
mm,
supplier of something, if I was a solar
mhm,
panel provider, as
mhm,
an example, I may need to make sure that I've got a strong B2C or B2B process to my business to pay the bills day to day, and R&D or
mhm.
business development into B2G.
Okay. In the Philippine government, before you actually become a supplier, you need to pass a rigorous process of meeting the national database
Mhm,
of being a licensed supplier for the government. So
mhm,
that requires a lot of paperwork. They would require you to have a capitalization of X amount of millions, depending on what
mhm,
industry. you're in, right? So let's just say DPWH, who handles the national roads of the country. For you to be a contractor to build the roads in their behalf, you need to have a cap table at a certain amount. That takes time to develop as an organization. The shortest description that I can give it is build the muscle first before you go in and punch someone.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. That's a fantastic analogy. Because I think that's something some people, I've known people and they think they're going to sell this to the government and make a ton of money and blah, blah, blah. And I think that really sums it up. It can be good, but for example, I knew a guy that was trying to run, this is a nonprofit, but he was trying to run orphanages in Cambodia. And for the longest time, they were government funded. And he said one of the best decisions we did was get corporate sponsors because governments change, they can be fickle.
Yes.
Competition can be really fierce, but with corporate sponsors, when you get corporate sponsors, they're your sponsor. And unless you mess something up, they're there every year. You know what I mean? Like they show up and they're consistent. So I was just curious about that. That's all. It depends on the business model.
I just want to add to what you said as well. And as entrepreneurs, us as business owners, we see opportunities to, how can we monetize this and that? But when it comes to dealing with government, one thing that we have to understand as a baseline is government is there to regulate. They're not exactly there to make money, not unless it's the tax office. So when it comes to that mindset, approach it with the mindset of, how can I help this government entity do its mandate and then monetize that opportunity to help them with that mandate?
That's good. For people that aren't aware, can you talk about what you're doing now? You talked about how your dad started it. In some ways, I feel like we've been teasing him. My dad started it and he ran it and then I took over. Now it's my life mission. And there's people who might be like, what is it?
Okay, so basically, we are an independent oil and gas exploration company. We have our sites somewhere down the south of the country. And we're excited about the project. We're exploring areas that we see a potential to capitalize on natural gas, which is the renowned bridge fuel globally as the world transitions to net zero. So big, impactful project ahead, monstrous task ahead at the same time, but we're excited to do that. We are basically reverse engineering the whole process internally in a sense that we are collaborating with technical partners that can help us with our work program. And at the same time, we have our champions or our angels investing in the space, because when I talk about this industry to people, their eyeballs are just going to pop because it's a very niche industry in the Philippines. 10% of the country has only been explored. That should tell you that it's a very small industry. Yes. When you talk about electricity in the Philippines, they think that it's just the power grids and your power providers, which is Meralco. Behind that, there's a lot more, there's more complexity to it. And we come in as the supplier of that energy source. So in the Philippines, the problem is we are a net importer of electricity and we're powered by mostly coal. With the net zero goal, you have solar and you have wind that's coming in. Unfortunately, these are intermittent energy sources, which means they are not stable. They are not suitable for base load. And that's where natural gas comes in as something that can lower energy costs for everybody. We are in the space of providing energy source for every Filipino.
That's fantastic. And for people that don't know, quality of life is directly tied to energy. It's free, cheap energy. The cheaper and more abundant the energy, the more prosperous the civilization. It's good history.
Yes. And we've actually, when I rebooted this whole company, I wanted to have that word bubble. You understand this, Daryl, when it comes to marketing. There has to be a word bubble that brings forth that inspiration of why are we actually doing this? And for me, the word that came out was actually legacy, right? This is a project that you don't build in 1 to 3 years and then you're out. This is something that is generational. And my vision for this company is we will be an active contributor to a legacy of development for the region. Why is that? Because coming from what you said, you were right. Energy is actually the bedrock of everything else in our modern life. And if you look into the data, Philippines actually has one of the most expensive energy costs. And that has impacted our opportunities to invite foreign investors to build their manufacturing facilities. For tourism to actually thrive, we can't build more infrastructure because investors are not coming in because of the energy costs at the same time. Everything else, even your Wi-Fi at home. If you're having a brownout, no Wi-Fi.
ATMs don't work. Gas station pumps don't work. You can't fill your car. You can't go get money from the ATM. You can't make phone calls. Yeah, that's a big.
And the problem with the Philippines is it's an archipelago nation. So we suffer through the 2 seasons, summer and rain season here. Now, the metropolitans of the country, Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, and you have Davao, they are sparred from blackouts because it has the highest economic growth, right? So there's prioritization there. But if you look into the provinces and the entire country, there are brownouts all over. Imagine the economic impact on that downtime. And we hope to hopefully contribute to that.
That's huge. That's super huge. I think that's incredibly, it's a major part of it. And by being able to afford the country cheap, free energy, you enable all sorts of industries. There's so many things that can be done from basic day-to-day living to massive projects with industry. So for yourself, where do you see things in the future, where we are right now? I personally think solar has a bright future. I think wind energy is a bit of a dead end. What are your thoughts? Because you talk about baseline energy, I think in the last 70 years, we'll say, since people started being concerned with the environment, we went from being something like 84, 87% dependent on fossil fuels to 82%. And that's with trillions of dollars of investment. Where do you see things over the next 5-10 years?
Okay. If you look into the news, there has been a shift with the funding space for renewable energy. A lot of the banks have actually pulled out. Trump has also moved out of the whole Paris Agreement thing. It's drill, baby, drill for him. So this is how I see it. Yes, we are going into the net zero. We have to be if we care about the environment. I am for that as well. But it has to be approached in a very pragmatic mindset because the technology with renewable, or I should say alternative energy, which is your solar, which is your wind, even with nuclear is not renewable, but that as a technology does take time for it to be at an industrial scale. Since we are not yet there, renewable is still in its infancy phase in terms of industrialization. We need something stable that can help us get to that goal. And rather than shoot fossil, why don't we look into the problem of, is it really fossil? That's the problem. What we have identified with the industry players is it's basically just the technology that needs to be adopted, newer technology that actually needs to be adopted to create lesser emissions with the current power source. So that's one thing. In the case of natural gas, we say, oh, okay, no, it's fossil fuel. Let's shut that down. We can't do that. If we're going to shut down natural gas, expect that your electricity will
people are going to die. Zero growth is an anti-human philosophy. You need economic growth and you need energy. Plants grow, animals grow, babies grow. You need growth. I think there's a case to be made that we're filling the oceans with plastic, we're overfishing the oceans, we're deforesting the planet. Why not just grow hemp? I get there's claims to be made for that. As far as the whole carbon global warming thing, the problem with the global warming and carbon is that the planet produces and manages something like 3,080 gigatons of carbon every year. Humans are producing tons of carbon, but the planet naturally is handling over 3,000, I don't know if I said 3,040 gigatons of carbon. So how much of an impact is that having? When they talk about global warming, the problem is it depends when you start your measurements from. The planet's been an ice ball a couple of times.
Yes, we had a lot of iterations as well, ice age and everything else.
And the Cambrian explosion, which was the largest explosion of life on the planet, it was something like 10 degrees hotter as a base temperature than it is now, when there was more life on the planet than there is today, supposedly. So there's all these concerns about that sort of detail. Now, does it mean that we shouldn't be concerned? Of course we should be concerned. But it seems like the timeline's been accelerated. If you look in the 80s, they said the Earth was going to turn into an ice ball. So all this stuff, it's like we do need to be aware. but I think we have to prioritize human flourishing and health
Mm.
and develop new technology as necessary. Of course, I saw this great meme. It was like my grandfather full of lead, my dad full of asbestos, me full of microplastic. And it was like the three of them in a room. And it was, it's true, right? But we keep iterating and improving. There's a philosophy of Gaia, this Mother Earth that nurtures us and takes care of us. And it's true, but it's more like an abusive parent relationship because the band of the earth that humans can thrive on without technology is very narrow. Basically, it's us in the Philippines near the equator. I'm from Canada. You couldn't live in Canada without technology. So for life to expand and for our civilization to flourish, we had to develop technologies that combated Mother Earth so we could survive in different climates.
Yes.
And so we do need to figure out how to make it better, more sustainable, how to stop plastics. All that's true. But I don't think energy is the enemy. I agree with you on that.
It's not okay. Fossil has been, let's just say, demonized for the fact that it's not environmentally friendly, right? I say this comically with friends as well. I had a conversation with a kid about fossil because he was like really curious about it, and they said this to the kid. You know what? Even you yourself, you're walking around. Even when you fart, you're actually emitting CO2, right? So it's not a question of we're canceling this one here, let's just say fossil, and we're going 100% to renewable. That's not supposed to be the mindset. The mindset should be, how can we produce with lesser impact? And how can we actually consume as a consumer with lesser impact as well? So it all boils down to how your process starts from your pre-development all the way to your market distribution. And that's one thing that I would like every regular consumer to at least have a baseline understanding of. Because when you say, okay, stop oil and gas, you might as well start walking from your home to your work.
People, like, again, in Canada, hypothermia, like it gets so cold outside, you'll die. And people don't understand. That's why we need innovation. We need free market incentives for people to innovate. So there's a reward for being the most productive and coming up with a solution. I've thought ever since I was a kid, man, it would be great if someone invented some sort of cap that you could put on an exhaust pipe for motorcycles and cars that took the exhaust and turned it into a solid.
Carbon capture now.
But I was just a kid and I remember that. I was like, man, it would be great if there's something you could add on, or like a bag that then you could go, and then that sort of thing. All these chimney stacks, if there was a way to. So a lot of the stuff, it's not even pollution, it's just an abundance of chemicals mismanaged. And we need to figure that out. The new knowledge is the solution, not going back to living with sticks and cooking with fire and living in caves.
Another thing that needs to be factored here as well is population growth. Humanity is not going to stop making babies, and that growth requires energy source as well. So the problem here for us is, I wouldn't say really a problem, but there seems to be like a horse with the whole net zero goal. There is, the general population doesn't really understand the whole ecosystem, the energy ecosystem. And because when you talk about the energy ecosystem, it's not just renewable, it's not just fossil, it's everybody. From the gas to your pump, to your car, that's energy source. To your hospital, wherein they need to power up the machines to help you with your diagnosis, those kinds of things. And I guess that's also where media plays a part in really educating everybody on how they're
or brainwashing.
There are pros and cons to every industry, but let's have a conversation of how we can actually minimize the cons and offer a solution for more on the pros.
And you have to think also about the agenda of the people that are sharing the message. You talked about farting, cows farting. How come no one was talking about pets and horses? Why is it our food supply? Why do we need to reduce our food supply versus, hey, stop having pets? There's already been like a no kid movement, right? Stop having kids. It's bad for. Why not stop having dogs and cats? I think there's more pets on the planet than there are cows, and we need cows for food to eat. So there's no one doing this. This stuff is nonsense, some of it.
When you say go ahead.
Sorry, no, what did you want to say?
Okay. So when you say yes to something, you indirectly say no to something else as well.
Correct.
Let's look into the solar industry. I am not shooting them down. They're doing good in the space, right? They are a technology fit for a certain problem. So I've read an article a few months back. There's a solar energy company in the Philippines that's going to build a 3,000 or 4,000 megawatt solar power plant, right? For them to provide the 4,000 megawatt electricity, they will need to use 4,000 hectares of land. So you said yes to using that land for solar farm, which you can also translate that 4,000 could be a producing plot of land for agriculture. So something has to give. The problems of Germany with their electricity is different from here in the Philippines.
Right.
So that's another thing. Looking into it holistically on what is best.
100%. How is natural gas made? You mentioned that you guys are doing exploration. So where is natural gas decomposed dinosaur bones?
Okay, depends. Basically, for what we're looking into, we're looking at marine fossil. So there's so much history. You're talking about fossil fuel that's been developed from millions of years ago. It's underground. It's been sitting there, and it's only a question of where it is located that is of commercial volume. And then we as humans are going to extract it and use it for whatever it is that you need to use it for. In this case, electricity source. It's not something that we produce. It is something that we actually extract underneath.
Right.
And we have to thank Mother Earth for that, or else, and I'm a firm believer that it is Mother Earth who provided this to us for us to utilize this with our life. And with natural gas, it all boils down to how it is being processed. In the case of producing natural gas, you extract it, and usually it comes with oil as well. So these two go hand in hand. It's only a question of, okay, is it more gas dominated or is it more oil dominated, crude? And then if it's gas dominated, we call it natural gas reservoir. And then you extract it and you process it, and then it goes to the midstream section, wherein you have your pipelines to transport it, and then it goes to the downstream, which is your processing. This is where your refinery comes in. And then that gas translates to natural gas that you actually use to power your power plants. That's going to power up your city. And then the byproducts of that, you have propane, you have butane, you have the gas that you use for cooking. So that's one. And then on the other aspect of that, you have crude, which then has byproducts that you use to plastics for your phone, right? And then all these other stuff for your medicines, for your tires and everything else for the.
I remember somebody saying that these people were wearing like winter clothes doing some sort of protest against fossil fuels. And this guy was walking up going, that without fossil fuels, you'd be naked right now. Everything you're wearing was made from petroleum products, everything.
Touche. So we as humanity right now, we do have a level of incongruency with this. Yeah.
Well, part of it, again, as we said, it's not about going backwards. It's about developing new knowledge. We have turned sand into intelligence. People don't get this. We've got sun, water, earth, metal, fire, and the miracle of life. And with those things and combining them with knowledge, we create everything that we know of today. And we've turned sand into silicone chips and silicone chips into AI. So we've turned sand into intelligence. And that was done with knowledge. And so the solution is more knowledge, better explanations, better science, real science. That's the way to lead us forward, that we don't even know what we could be capable of. We don't even know the story Acres of Diamonds. It grows up on a farm, and his whole life he dreams of discovering a diamond mine and becoming rich and famous. And once his parents pass on and he inherits the farm, he sells it and he ventures out into the world to find this diamond mine he's dreamed of finding his whole life. And 10 years later, he's back in his hometown and he's a little broken, destitute, and he's in this cafe that he used to go to as a kid. And he's reading the local paper, and the people he sold his parents' farm to discovered diamonds under the soil of his parents' farm. And so the answer is that we all have acres of diamonds in our backyard. We're just not looking hard enough. This goes back to the client I said that I had that said, I need more leads. But when we looked into it, they actually have acres of diamonds. They're just not applying knowledge properly to it, if that makes sense. And so saying the future is forward, not backwards.
Yeah. And it's also helpful that when we look at let's just say our environment organizations. It's good to be zone in internally, but sometimes for you to actually see the opportunities internally, you need to zoom out. And I say that as as a figurative example of how I actually looked into this business. I didn't see this as an opportunity then because I was so zoomed in on, okay, this is too big for me. I don't know how to make this work, or maybe I can touch base on this, but I don't have the other pieces that will move this forward. But when you look up, you're like, okay, so it's not so bad. I just need to do this. I just need to find these people, blah, 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 blah. This is just the process. And then you now have a much better understanding. Because of your understanding of the macro details of your industry, you can now go in and look into the micro things because it now creates a full picture for you. Right. So if I do this, it's going to affect this. Systems thinking, basically.
That's good. Yeah. Systems thinking. I like that. And all the inputs and outputs and knowing that it's going to be flawed. We're going to learn more anyhow. Rica, this has been actually, you know what, before I say this, you just get Karl Popper. He was once one of the most famous science educators and he had a formula for science. It was P1 plus TS plus E equals P2. Problem 1 plus temporary solution plus eliminate the errors equals problem 2. And the idea is that he said there is no scientific method. There is no guaranteed way to achieve a scientific discovery. What we have is a process we use to prevent ourselves from fooling ourselves. You start off with a problem, you hypothesize a temporary solution, you apply the solution, and you eliminate the errors in it through experimentation, observation, discourse, and data collection. And through that, you either go back and develop a new temporary solution.
You iterate.
Or if you found it, you move on to P2. And so he said symptoms thinking. I just got that little diagram in my head of the loop.
And being agile when it comes to doing things is actually very important. Right. Never lose sight of that sense of curiosity, because sometimes when you're too rigid on certain systems and certain processes, you lose that eureka moment because you're so fixed on that. What I have applied with this project we're doing is what I've learned in the tech space, that there's reiterations are very quick. And you need to be agile with such changes. And we're using that, especially for this project where you have 15 to 20 years of development. And that takes a lot of patience. But at the same time, if you look into the minute of details, there's actually a lot of changes that comes with
happening faster.
Yeah.
I love that. Rica, this has been a great call. I think it's an important topic. I think it's something that more people need to talk about. I really do. Energy is mission critical. And if people want to engage more, if they want to learn more, what are some of the best ways for them to connect?
I'm available on LinkedIn. I don't have much footprint there, but basically you can message me if anybody wants to reach out to us and learn more about what we do. We are open to technical partners and change agents who believe in the vision and the mission that we are putting forward. As I always say, it's a legacy project. And if you see the value in providing sustainable energy resource for the country, please reach out to us. We also have our Michelle Lockhurst as our PR, who's in charge of handling all of the inquiries. So I guess you'll be adding some details to your podcast with that.
Sure. Yeah, you can go check out
Sarangani Petro Oil.
There we go.
Go ahead.
SARANGANI.com. You can also look her up on LinkedIn. If you look up Rica, RICA, Serenio, SERENIO. We've got the right one if she's based in the Philippines. And again, works with Sarangani Petro Oil Corporation. Rica,
Sarangani Petro Oil Corporation to help you out.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom, knowing you've got your own project, your own direct reports, your own priorities. Thank you for coming and sharing with my audience and I, so we could all learn a little more on the subject.
You as well, and I hope I can support you with your podcast and your team. Ready to help you guys out with whatever it is that you're rolling out.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank,
And thank you.
thank,
And thank you.
thank,
And thank you.
thank.
And thank you.